He wakes up in a room he doesn't recognize and can't believe his eyes. When he looks in the mirror, he sees a prince, straight out of a novel he once read. At first, he's shocked and slaps himself just to make sure it's not a dream. And when he feels the very real pain, he isn't scared at all. Instead, he can't contain his sheer happiness. Just then, a system message pops up. He receives the HP system, which allows him to gain HP by treating his internal organs. By investing the HP he acquires, he can unlock various skills or even summon creatures. There's just one problem. His current HP is stuck at 0. Still, he doesn't quite grasp what this all means for him yet. Back in the real world, he had opened his own clinic, but things didn't go so well. During COVID-19, many of his patients got infected and blamed his clinic for it. Before he knew it, he was bankrupt and drowning in debt. One night, after having too much to drink, he jumped off a bridge. That's how he ended up in a new world with a new body. Now he's finally free from all his debts, but the moment he jumps out of bed in excitement, he collapses right back down. Something is seriously wrong with this body. His personal physician, Gordon, rushes in and tells him to relax and avoid any sudden movements. Looking down at his hand, he realizes that this body is much weaker than a normal 40-year-old's, even though he's a young man. To his horror, he realizes the character he's become is always bedridden and only appears briefly in the novel. Not only that, but he also dies at the age of 22. With a sense of dread, he asks Gordon his age, and Gordon replies that he's 21. He bites his lip as soon as he hears this. Before realizing the character had such serious health issues, he was just relieved to have escaped his debt-ridden life to enjoy a new one as the Crown Prince. But now, he's filled with dread, realizing he only has 1 year left to live. He remembers from the novel that the Crown Prince died despite receiving the best treatment in the world, and even a cleric's blessing. Yet nothing worked and he still met his end. While looking in the mirror, he concludes that all of this points to only one solution. With that thought in mind, he turns to Gordon and asks him to bring as many needles as possible in every size. He's decided to treat himself. He checks his pulse, trying to understand the nature of his illness. He tries to concentrate on 10 strange pulses where the illness might be originating. If one of them shows symptoms, there's a chance he's dealing with an internal injury. At that moment, Gordon interrupts him as he brings the needles he had ordered, laying them down before him. After inspecting them, he picks one up. Seeing him warming up the needle, Gordon asks what he plans to do with it. He bluntly replies that he's going to poke his body with it, leaving poor Gordon horrified, who thinks his master is about to harm himself. He desperately pleads with him not to do it. Our hero tries to calm Gordon down, saying that he's doing this for a good reason, and asks him to trust him on this, to which Gordon reluctantly agrees. With that, he takes off his shirt and lies down on the bed. He knows that he needs to place the first needle into a vital point related to his lungs. To do this, he must first calm his breathing. Near his shoulder is the point called tie-in, which is part of the lung meridian of the hand. He carefully pokes the spot, feeling a slight sting due to the needle's thickness. Now he focuses on the acupoints, starting with the lung meridian, then moving to cloud gate and finally upper arm assembly. After completing the first set, he opens his eyes. It seems like he's been granted the accurate acupuncture skill. By applying this technique to himself, he's able to recover his lungs a little. With that, a ridiculous scene appears, a pair of happily dancing lungs. Give him 2 thumbs up, resulting in a gain of 100 HP, which is equal to 100 power. Our guy is pretty baffled by the screen in front of him as he takes in all this new information. Our boy is super curious to see the status window that's popped up in front of him. Seeing his master's state poor Garden, thinks he's gone crazy and starts to cry again. Our prince just tells him not to overreact. Ignoring his emotional doctor, he decides to target another acupoint near his shoulder blade. This acupoint is called the young man acupoint, which he hits perfectly, resulting in some relief in his chest. He then targets several acupoints in his arms. It hurts more than before, but he endures the pain. Seeing him like this, Garden starts praying to God for the health of his master's body and mind. Meanwhile, our guy takes the next step and pokes the Yunji acupoint as well. With this, he stimulates various acupressure points, and his lungs feel like they're getting a deep tissue massage in a fancy massage chair. He's irritated by the ridiculous images on his screen, wishing it would just give him some HP instead. Next, he focuses on the cheesy acupoint, which is located on his palm. With that final touch, he successfully completes the acupoint treatment for the left lung meridian. As a result, he gets 100 HP, and both of his lungs give him 200 HP each. This means he now has 600 HP. With this increase in his HP, he is now able to activate his skill. His screen asks if he would like to shop for some skills. Seeing this, he's reminded of all those fantasy novels where the protagonist gets a cool warrior or mage skill, So he decides to check it out. But contrary to his expectations, all the skills shown are related to medicine and treatment. He figures it's because of all the work he did in his past life. Looking at the list, he decides to choose pulse reading, which helps him diagnose illnesses, the very foundation of all treatment and prescription if done right. For 500 HP, he purchases the first stage of this skill. By acquiring this skill, he's able to roughly diagnose a patient's health condition. He then gets a basic overall health check report. To test it out, he decides to read his own pulse and checks the report. The system then informs him that his body is in the worst possible condition, and he has a maximum of 3 months to live. He thinks to himself that's even shorter than a cell phone contract, so he immediately gets back to concentrating on his treatment using acupressure points. He wonders if inserting a needle in a clockwise direction while twirling it using the reinforcing and reducing method will work. He can breathe out during this process, extracting the needles with the respiratory supplementation and draining method. So he performs the technique and is amazed to see that his lifespan has been extended by 1 day. He's so excited that he starts to perform it on his other hand too, which only results in him bleeding. Unlike last time, his system warns him that he has overdone the acupuncture and recommends that he should only do it once every 3 days. A diagram of his organs appears and they look completely trashed. He realizes that a patient's body needs to be stable to endure continuous acupuncture treatments, but his own body is far too weak to tolerate that kind of therapy. He then analyzes his situation and concludes that even though the acupuncture is working with his body's weakened state, it will only extend his life for 1 month before he eventually dies. After thinking it over for a while, he decides that he needs actual medicine to treat his body. For this, he turns to Garden, who is a doctor in this world. He asks for a rather potent ingredient, which makes Garden a little hesitant. He inquires if they have any wolfsbane root, but Garden explains that since they are in his personal palace, they need to request it from the main palace. He says he will do it, but he wants to know what the plan is. Our guy deadpans that he's going to eat it. Upon hearing this, the poor doctor begs him not to do it. He explains to the doctor that it's for his own treatment. However, Garden isn't reassured in the slightest, so our boy starts to break it down for him. He asks if Garden is aware that wolf's bane root is toxic, which Garden confirms, noting that it's used in poison. He clarifies that he needs the daughter root of the wolf's bane, which is much smaller than the normal kind. To that, Garden deadpans that it could stop his heart. In response, our boy admits that's true, but insists he knows a method to turn this poison into medicine. This sounds completely bizarre to Garden. Our hero continues explaining that the process is called detoxification, and it will help him turn this poison into a cure. He asks if Garden understands now. Garden honestly replies that he doesn't understand a single thing, but he decides to give it a try if it might improve his master's health. As he heads to the pharmacy to get the root, he thinks about how nothing has been able to stop his master's declining health. Now he's willing to place all his hope in this new treatment. However, he resolves to try it first himself to ensure it's safe for his master to take. After getting the root, our boy successfully makes a tonic out of it. But Garden seems pretty skeptical upon seeing this strange-looking liquid and points out that it's made from a poisonous substance. He then starts begging him not to drink it. Seeing Garden's pitiful display, our boy decides to tease him a little, so he offers Garden the first sip. This statement actually brightens Garden's face because he had wanted to test it himself anyway, so he happily agrees to be the guinea pig. Seeing his eagerness to risk his life for him, our hero is struck by the realization that in the novel, Garden was incredibly loyal to the Crown Prince. In the beginning, he wasn't even his official doctor, just an assistant. As time passed, every doctor who claimed they could provide a cure eventually left, but Garden alone remained unwavering. However, he paid a high price for his devotion because in the novel, he was executed after the Crown Prince's death, having been accused of causing it. Looking at him, our boy thinks that he's someone who deserves a good life. But sharing his precious tonic with him is another matter entirely, and he's not quite ready to do that. After a bit, he finally finishes brewing the tonic in ephedra innite asarum decoction. Garden is about to chug it, but our hero stops him, explaining it needs to be consumed cold. That's when Garden suddenly voices his concern about how the Crown Prince of all people knows the recipe for this medicine. Our boy thinks fast, claiming a mage gave him the recipe in a dream. Even though Garden says he believes him, his face tells a completely different story. He glances at the time and in a hurry gulps down the entire concoction, leaving the poor doctor absolutely horrified. He looks up at his doctor with innocent eyes, proclaiming that he drank it all. All of a sudden, his heart starts racing and he gets the feeling that something big is about to happen. Right on cue, his system alerts him that consuming the perfectly brewed ephedra A night a serum decoction has resulted in a reduction in his body's soreness and coldness, plus a nice boost to his metabolism. But that's not all. He's also awakened the Azrahan core energy. That last part really catches his attention. The Azrahan core energy is a technique developed by the Grandmaster Javier Azrahan and his loyal subordinate Lloyd. This technique is a symbol of the imperial family, passed down exclusively to direct descendants of the royal line. Since he's currently in the Crown Prince's body, he must have been taught this technique from a very young age. He's now unlocked the first level of this technique, which allows his mana circle to rotate around his heart, helping him build and absorb mana. His mana is now at 120%, and he needs 1000 HP to level up. He can actually feel the mana circle around his heart and the energy flowing through his body with every single breath. He's beyond excited to be experiencing such an incredible sensation. But suddenly a sharp pain shoots through his heart, and it feels like it's about to burst right out of his chest. Seeing him clutch his chest in pain, Garden becomes extremely worried. Meanwhile, a system warning pops up. There's a chance his heart could stop at any moment due to the pressure from the mana circle. When he realizes his mana circle and his heart's development are out of sync, he figures the size of the mana circle must be the problem since it's wrapped around his heart. He remembers Raquel's condition, whose illness prevented him from training his mana circle when he was young. As a result, the mana circle is now constricting his heart, which could have disastrous consequences. So he decides to take matters into his own hands. He has to increase the size of his mana circle. With that resolution, he travels to the realm of his own heart, standing before the very organ and the mana circle that's strangling it. He rushes toward his heart and grabs hold of the circle, determined to force it to rotate even faster. The pain and pressure from this are almost too much for him to handle. But then he remembers the failures of his past life, how his clinic was shut down. He didn't just lose his patients. He was so stressed from the debt that he started losing his hair. Every kind of loan imaginable piled up until he was on the verge of selling his beautiful home. Fueled by that memory, he pushes through and finally does it. With that, he opens his eyes to see his doctor looking incredibly worried about him. His system informs him that the positive stimulation was just what he needed to awaken his heart. Afterwards, our guy's heart, the king of all organs, makes a very flashy entrance, welcomed by the large intestine while the lungs call him shabby. Seeing them bicker is annoying, but his irritation vanishes when his system informs him he's the first person in history to get something called a monocircle slot. He has no idea what this feature is, but figures it must be something like an empty inventory slot in a game. Meanwhile, Garden is still worried and asks if he's okay, since he looked like he was in agonizing pain. He raises the question of whether it's a side effect from the medicine. Our boy makes up an excuse about choking on some phlegm, but Garden isn't buying it. He insists our boy was in agony, complaining that he was supposed to be the one to drink it first. To that, our boy shoots back that he'll give him poison next time if he's that eager. This prompts a protest from his doctor, who insists that's not what he meant at all. He nonchalantly tells him to just clean up the mess on the floor if his doctor doesn't want it. But before leaving, he turns and thanks his doctor, leaving the man completely stunned. He wonders if our hero went crazy from drinking that poison. Meanwhile, as he walks, our guy is ecstatic about having something as awesome as mana slots. These slots are basically storage spaces where he can keep any material mixed with mana up to 10 liters. He just has to consume the material in order to store it. After meditating, he decides to experiment with this new skill, but at first he isn't sure what to store. Then he spots a jug of water and decides to give it a try. Looking at the water reminds him of a term called the median lethal dose, which is used to measure a substance's toxicity. Consuming 50% of the median lethal dose could either kill a person or cause agonizing pain. He does the math and concludes that there is about a 5.4 liter median lethal dose in 60 kilograms of water. Based on his own size and weight, his limit should be around 3.9 liters. So he picks up the jug to drink, but it's too heavy for his weak body to lift. Regardless, he starts drinking, figuring he has a good reason for storing this water in his mana slots. He's surprised that he doesn't feel full even after drinking about 1 liter of water, so he decides to fill his entire 10-liter slot to see what happens. After filling his slot with 10 liters of water, he discharges just 0.1 liters and feels quite full afterward. He figures this basically makes him a human camel, able to store water inside himself. Now that the water experiment is done, he wants to try using the slot for the tonic soup. However, he still has 9.9 liters of water stored, and his body obviously can't handle releasing all of that at once. Then he gets an idea. He'll use the Azrahan core technique, which helps absorb, amplify, and discharge mana. Using the amplification and discharge functions of the technique, he aims to release the water outside his body instead of inside. He concentrates solely on discharging the water from his body, and to his complete surprise, it actually starts to work. The next step is to pour the water back into the jug, but when he tries, he loses control of the technique and the jug shatters. The moment the guards hear the shattering sound, they barge into his room. Meanwhile, he's mulling over his experiment with the Azran core technique. He had assumed it would trickle out like tap water, but instead it blasted out like a water cannon. Garden rushes in with the other guards, asking if there was some kind of terrorist attack. Scrambling for an excuse, he claims that he smashed a jug in a fit of anger. It seems the guards buy his story, and one of them even asks if he's hurt. He nervously answers that he just got a little scratch on his foot. The guard asks Garden to escort him to room 2, and Garden agrees after tending to the wound, while getting a piggyback ride. On Garden's back, he realizes that no matter how terrible his excuse was, they still believed it. He chalks it up to being the crown prince. Garden places him on the bed and excuses himself. In return, the prince tells Garden to get some rest as well. Once Garden leaves, he starts contemplating what went wrong when he was practicing the Azran technique. He was trying to amplify the mana and discharge it through his hand, but it resulted in an outburst like a fire hose. For now, he decides to get some sleep and be more careful next time so he doesn't make anyone suspicious. Meanwhile, the Emperor gets wind of his son hurting himself with needles and enthusiastically drinking poison, which infuriates him because he has no idea what his son is up to. The next morning, he successfully brews 10 liters of his medicine, ready to down it all. But Garden is standing right beside him, and he doesn't want to drink it in front of him, knowing the guard would probably faint at the sight. So he asks Garden to wait outside for a moment. Garden deadpans that he's just going to drink it again, pointing out how much pain he was in last time. He even reminds the prince of his previous excuse about choking on phlegm. Garden expresses his concern, noting how large a batch of the tonic he's made this time. Our boy makes up an excuse saying that he's just experimenting and that he only plans to take a small sip since it's impossible for him to drink the whole thing. At that, Garden laughs it off, agreeing that there's no way he could. But our hero is impatient with all the unnecessary concern and basically throws him out of the kitchen. Afterwards, he closes the door and gulps down all 10 liters of the tonic at once, storing it in his mana slots. Now all he has to do is discharge it. He slowly begins to discharge the tonic while going about his day. His organs seem to be improving as he releases the medicine into his body, which grants him some HP. He now has 500 horsepower. He's a bit on edge, but eager to increase his lifespan. For this reason, he releases the medicine into his system quite frequently. Meanwhile, in the organ dimension, the heart asks the large intestine for the menu of the day. The large intestine replies that they're having ephedra aconite and asarum. Not only that, it's the same menu for the entire day and for the next day as well. At that, his system warns him that his organs are sick of having the ephedra aconite asarum combo again and again. He annoyedly replies that they'll have whatever he gives them. While he's having a meal, his system informs him that he has extended his lifespan by 50 days. He now has 133 days left to live. He jumps up in excitement, startling the maid. She immediately begins apologizing profusely. He's confused, wondering why she's begging for forgiveness over something as simple as a broken cup. He gets his answer when she pleads with him not to whip her like he did last time. This makes him go rigid, realizing the original crown prince had actually been whipping this poor girl. Hoping he's wrong, he asks if he really did that to her. She says no much to his relief, but then clarifies that he didn't do it himself. He then has to ask what she could have possibly done to deserve that kind of punishment. Her crime daring to spill a single drop of water on his sleeve. He can only conclude that the original crown prince was a seriously cruel piece of work. Disturbed by this whole situation, he sits on his bed and just tells her to clean up and leave, which makes her face light up with relief. Once she leaves, he turns to Garden and asks how he's been acting toward him and the other servants since he can't remember much about himself. Garden tries to sugarcoat things, but our guy bluntly warns him that if he lies, he'll down all the poison right then and there. That gets the truth out of him. Garden spills the beans about his cruel and rude behavior towards all the servants. Hearing all this leaves him incredibly frustrated. Now it all makes sense why the guards so easily bought his ridiculous excuse about the broken bottle. But this raises another question. Why is someone like Garden so loyal to such a monster? He asks Garden, directly pointing out that he doesn't seem to be afraid of him. Garden softly explains that it's because he knows the kind of person the prince is capable of being and trusts that he'll return to his true self. A flashback reveals a young Raquel completely drenched, shielding a tiny chick from the rain. Remembering this moment, Garden adds that he trusts Prince Raquel will return to his kinder self as his health improves. And after Raquel just thanked him, Garden feels like it's already starting to happen. Our guy offers Garden a pastry, which the servant accepts with a little hesitation. Right then he makes a vow he will never let Garden be framed for his death. To do that, he has to survive. Just then, the door bangs open as someone rushes in. Calling his name, the servant frantically announces that the emperor has summoned him. The scene shifts to the main royal palace, where Raquel approaches his father's court. The moment he greets his father, the emperor immediately notices his awakened Azrahan technique. He also senses our hero's nervousness. Meanwhile, our protagonist is getting tired of bowing and just wishes his father would get on with it so he can stand up. The emperor asks how he's finding life in the side palace and if it's satisfactory, to which he answers yes. All the while he's getting pretty irritated about having to remain bowed while they talk. The emperor then brings up the rumors he's heard about him piercing himself with needles and consuming poison at home. Raquel immediately tries to deny it, but the emperor launches into a tirade about how he's losing his dignity as crown prince and that if he feels he can't handle the burden of being the successor, he can just pass the title to his younger brother. Caught off guard, our guy politely refuses the offer. His refusal clearly angers the emperor. Our hero, however, pauses for a second, realizing the emperor has every right to just strip him of his title as the successor, and yet he chose not to do it. He suddenly understands the emperor is asking him rather than ordering him because he wants to make it look to the world like his own son willingly stepped down to acknowledge his younger brother. So he sees right through this devious political maneuver, but he doesn't plan to go down without a fight no matter how weak he might be. The emperor, on the other hand, is so furious that he shoots up from his throne and accuses him of bringing shame upon the imperial family just to keep the title of crown prince. Our guy scoffs at this since he couldn't care less about the title. In reality, he's read the novel, and according to it, the second prince isn't capable enough to handle the age of chaos that's coming soon. As a result, he will cause the downfall of both the imperial family and the empire. So he turns to the emperor and explains that he doesn't care about the title, but about the prosperity of their family. He then proposes a chance to prove that he's more capable than the second prince. The scene then shifts to the side palace, where Garden is eager to know why the emperor summoned our hero. He explains everything to him, dropping the bomb that he is going to have a sword duel with the second prince, which makes the stunned doctor pack his bags ready to leave after his master is defeated. Meanwhile, the emperor mulls over Raquel's words, intrigued by this new side of his son. That's why he accepts his proposal. The next day, everyone in the empire gathers to witness the sword duel between the brothers. The girls are all fawning over the second prince, Theodore. Up on the stage, our guy is seen warming up for the duel. When Theodore approaches him, he tells him there's no need for that. He says with concern that he doesn't want him to risk his health because he just wants to legitimize his brother's claim, since everyone already knows the outcome of the duel. He adds that he doesn't want his brother to sacrifice himself just for this. At that, our guy is fired up and ready to fight, and he haughtily informs Theodore that both he and their father have misunderstood because he has zero intention of losing. Before the duel begins, there are murmurs from the crowd about how bizarre it is for the crown prince to challenge the second prince. After all, the second prince has the upper hand with his single circle Azran core. They don't think he stands a chance against the second prince. In a flashback, we see our guy warming up with Garden standing beside him, who thinks this whole duel is just a joke. Our guy replies that no one expects him to win, which is great because it takes all the pressure off. However, Garden says with uncertainty that he believes he can win. Our guy notices his expression and knows he's totally lying. He then tells him that he just needs to block 3 of his brother's attacks to win the match. Back in the present, Garden prays for his master's safety. The match starts and the emperor announces the rules. If our guy can defeat his brother or just withstand his attacks for 5 minutes, he will be the winner. Otherwise, the second prince will win the match. Now, the 2 brothers stand facing each other, but Theodore intends to get this match over with as quickly as possible. As soon as the match starts, everyone is stunned to see the crown prince toss his sword away. They wonder if he's giving up already. Seeing this, Theodore first feels relieved that he won't have to fight his sick brother, but then he remembers that this act will bring disgrace to him and his family. So he contemplates whether he should encourage his brother to at least put up a little bit of a fight model, but as our hero plants his shield firmly in front of him. Theodore realizes the crown prince's strategy is just to endure his attacks for 5 minutes, not to fight back. He scoffs at the defensive tactic. confident he can end this fight in a flash. Fueled by this thought, he channels his mana and lunges straight for his brother. The Emperor, watching intently, analyzes his second son's charge and concludes his firstborn won't be able to handle the blow. The second prince even angles his attack from above, a supposedly merciful gesture to prevent his brother from an embarrassing fall, but to the shock of the entire crowd, our hero gracefully sidesteps the attack. A spectator remarks that the second prince must be going easy on him, striking so weakly that even his brother could dodge it. Theodore attacks again, this time with full force, sending our MC flying, but he manages to land on his feet. Our hero's condition is deteriorating and his body is weakening, but his resolve is unshaken. All those years dodging trouble as a cop are finally paying off. He now takes cover behind his shield as the second prince charges forward, absorbing the impact's mana far more effectively than our hero anticipated. Yet a confident grin spreads across our MC's face, hinting that this is all part of his plan. On the other side, the second prince is completely fired up. He powers up a massive attack, leaps high into the air, and comes crashing down right on top of our hero. But our MC easily absorbs the impact, having specifically trained his lower body for this exact moment. Not only did he have the blacksmith customize his shield, but he also secretly stored a special concoction in his mana slots just for his dear little brother. His system window prompts him for the discharge amount, and he coolly replies, 0.2 liters. Instantly, his brother's mana-filled body is flooded with the mystery liquid. Theodore's face flushes a deep red, as if he'd been binge drinking, and he lets out a sudden hiccup. Theodore is completely bewildered, having no idea what's happening to his body. Meanwhile, Raquel recalls a crucial detail from the novel. Theodore has absolutely zero alcohol tolerance. That's why he loaded his mana slots with a potent cocktail and just injected it directly into his brother's system. Theodore desperately tries to regain his composure and fight back, but he's completely baffled by the strange substance that has invaded his body. He's fighting for his father's recognition, the citizens' cheers, and the title of Crown Prince. In his mind, his victory is the best outcome for everyone if he becomes the Crown Prince. For that future to happen, he absolutely has to win. With this renewed determination, he charges at his brother, who's actually surprised he withstood the cocktail bomb. So he unleashes another 0.1 liter cocktail bomb right into his brother. The scene suddenly shifts, and the second prince finds himself in a surreal internal landscape surrounded by his own organs, where he is served a drink by his own heart, who tells him it was a gift from that person. He turns to see that person is none other than his brother, who raises a glass in a toast. Staring at this bizarre sight, Theodore is utterly baffled, realizing he must be hallucinating. Seeing his brother completely drunk and dazed, the Crown Prince decides to help him end his suffering. He prepares to discharge the rest of the liquid stored in his mana slots into his brother. He channels this boozy mana into one final powerful blow, sending his brother crashing to the floor. Everyone in attendance is completely stunned by the shocking and unexpected turn of events they just witnessed. Witnessing the duel between his sons, the Emperor instantly recognizes that Raquel is using the Azrahan core, which he'd previously dismissed as a mistake. He can clearly sense the Azrahan core's energy radiating from him, even in a crowd of hundreds. Meanwhile, when Theodore opens his eyes, he finds his brother standing over him. His brother casually explains that he has just purified Theodore's impure mana. Theodore immediately identifies it as the Azrahan core and questions how his frail brother could possibly wield it. The supposedly sick brother nonchalantly replies that he was just a bit of a late bloomer. Glancing at his dropped sword, Theodore mutters that he's lost, prompting his brother to tease that he probably still can't believe it. That's when Theodore notices the blood on his brother's forehead. Our guy explains that he got the cut while blocking his brother's attack. Hearing this, Theodore has a moment of clarity, realizing how overconfident he'd been assuming victory without ever acknowledging his brother's efforts. Our boy then gets to his feet and asks if his brother's all right, but Theodore misunderstands and admits he feels deeply ashamed. However, Raquel clarifies that he was actually asking about Theodore's physical condition. At that, Theodore bows deeply before his brother, acknowledging his skill and his right as the Crown Prince in front of everyone. In that moment, a system window pops up in front of our hero, making him internally cheer that he's finally done it. Misunderstanding this as a gesture of victory over his brother, his aide Gordon gets all emotional. Our guy's system congratulates him for treating someone other than himself, revealing he's acquired a skill called requested medical treatment fees. This skill allows him to gain a small amount of life expectancy each time he heals another person. However, his mood sours when he sees that this method only extends his lifespan by a single day at a time, which is a painfully slow process. Still, he'll take what he can get, seeing it as a much more reliable way to extend his life than just using acupoint techniques or tonics. His train of thought is interrupted by his father, who asks if he used the Azrahan core in the fight, which he confirms. The Emperor then asks how he managed to acquire it. He gives a half-truth saying he doesn't really know since he can't exactly tell his dad he got it as a reward skill for healing his own body. His father, however, seems to believe him, adding that he had engraved the core into his body at birth, but due to his illness, he was never able to use it. The Emperor continues saying that our boy somehow managed to overcome his body's limitations and wield it anyway. Thinking he's being praised, he thanks his father. However, his father cuts him off, stating that this completely ruins his original plan, leaving our hero utterly confused. The Emperor turns his back on him, but assures his son that despite this little snag, he will honor his promise and acknowledge his position as the crown prince. Then he pauses, warning him that he will be keeping a close eye on him to see if he is truly worthy of succeeding the throne. This whole exchange really starts to tick our guy off, but the Emperor is also frustrated by the silence and yells at him to show some kind of reaction. Instead of answering, the Crown Prince starts giving his father fitness advice, telling him he should keep practicing with his sword so his muscles don't get stiff. He adds that he needs to eat more vegetables and kick his smoking habit. The Emperor demands to know what gives his son the right to lecture him like this, but our guy sincerely replies that he's just saying it out of concern for his father. A little later, the Emperor is riding in his carriage, scoffing as he thinks about his son's sudden change in behavior. It seems he's also worried about his son, using the Azran core technique so recklessly which could endanger his own health. He reflects on the high expectations he's always had for him, even with his illness. But now, after today's events, he finds himself holding on to a glimmer of hope for his son's future. Meanwhile, on his way home, our protagonist is thinking about his own father from his previous life, who died of a heart attack. He had skipped studying to go play when he got the call with the terrible news. He still regrets it, but it's far too late. Thinking about the Emperor who still has a chance, he decides he'll protect his new father too, using a skill that will also help extend his own life. At that moment, Gordon appears again, his face looking emotional as he requests his master to ask him why he's crying. Feeling awkward, he asks him anyway. Gordon tearfully expresses how proud he is of his master for winning the fight no matter how tough it was. He brushes off Gordon's concern, adding that he's going to rest since he has a lot to do tomorrow. Sensing his confusion, he explains that he has to meet someone the next day. Later, the prince is with Gordon at Sorrentino, one of the top 10 restaurants in the capital. The prince asks if he knows about this restaurant. Gordon replies that he's a regular. It turns out the prince is in disguise. When the waiter comes to take their order, the prince gives a strange request, asking for grape wine without grapes, and saying he'd like to eat until sunrise. It seems like this is some kind of secret code because as soon as he gives the order, the waiter instructs them to follow him. Both of them get up from their seats while Gordon looks completely bewildered by what's happening. Our prince tells Gordon to just follow the waiter, assuring him he'll understand soon enough. After a moment, the waiter leads them to a staircase. Gordon is still confused about how the Crown Prince could possibly know about this place. He, of course, only knows about it because he read about it in a novel. Gordon asks why they're here. He cryptically replies that he's here to collect some treatment fees, leaving Gordon puzzled. Changing the subject, he asks Gordon if he knows someone named Damien, but Gordon says no. Instead of explaining further to his loyal doctor, he opens the door at the end of the stairs. There they find a battle arena where two fighters are duking it out. As the crowd cheers, Gordon again asks what this place is. He happily replies that it's a secret location. Then looking around, he spots a tough-looking guy in the ring. Gordon asks if this is the Damien he mentioned before, but the prince says no. Just then, a door on the far side opens, revealing the true protagonist of the novel from his past life. This person is Damien Cayenne. The entire crowd cheers for Damien the moment he enters the Colosseum. The announcer tells the other fighter to clear out, then introduces Damien, who is fighting in the main match of the night. He is only 17 years old when he dives into the underworld, dominating everyone for the next 3 months and earning the title of Sword Genius. Then they let Damien's opponent enter the arena, a massive roaring troll that comes charging right at him. Our guy, who's been watching the spectacle, is understandably freaked out to see a real-life troll. Garden also objects, thinking they're about to serve a human appetizer to the troll. Meanwhile, down in the arena, the berserk troll is absolutely furious, but Damien gracefully dodges every single one of its attacks. Damien, who is sizing up the monster, unsheathes his sword, and in one swift motion, slices it clean in two. The crowd goes wild, completely in awe of his incredible feat. Meanwhile, our hero realizes this Damien guy is even more of a big deal than he expected. Then again, he remembers that's what you'd expect from the main character of the novel, the sword genius destined to be the rival of the legendary Grandmaster Swordsman. With that, he tells Garden to follow him and heads on his way. A little later, a burly guard stops them in their tracks, warning them not to go any further. But the moment our crown prince places a solid gold brick in the guard's palm, they're waved right on through. They finally sit down with the man himself, and our guy's trying his absolute best not to look terrified. Damien confidently holds up his bottle of painkillers and asks if our hero is really suggesting he take these cheap-looking pills. Damien then demands to know why he's there, cynically asking if he's just another snake oil salesman. Our hero just gives a vague answer saying something like that. Damien, on the other hand, tries to brush him off, saying he's had enough of peddlers. But our boy confidently declares that those cheap pills are useless for the constant throbbing pain in the back of his head. Now that gets his attention. Our hero then starts describing the very specific type of pain Damien has, where the symptoms start at the base of his skull, making his neck and head feel all stiff and itchy. He even asks, "And do your shoulders and neck ever feel numb?" Our guy immediately clocks the suspicious look in Damien's eyes, wondering how he could possibly know all this. He presses on, adding that Damien also feels intense pain on the sides of his head and right between his eyes. Not only that, but he probably gets goosebumps all over, and it feels like his eyes are about to pop out of his head. And to top it off, our guy is dramatically acting out every single symptom as he describes them. As Damien stares at him intently, our hero keeps the melodrama going, trying to convince him that he's just relying on painkillers instead of treating the root cause, which isn't a real solution. Damien is clearly getting annoyed by this performance and seriously considers just killing him on the spot. Finally, our hero tells Damien to actually say something, which only annoys him more, since he's the one who hasn't been able to get a word in edgewise. Anyway, Damien finally asks about the identity of our hero, who jokingly tells him the actual truth that he's the crown prince. This, of course, just irritates Damien. To salvage the situation, he quickly lies, saying he was sent there by Kuzman, who's basically Damien's sponsor. He adds that Kuzman is worried about him and that lately they've been short on ingredients because of the season. Damien has no idea what he's talking about. He asks our babbling hero to please explain what any of that means. Our hero explains that he's found a new way to relieve the pain. Damien asks if it's some new kind of medicine. Our hero replies that this kind of problem can't be treated with that medicine, so they need to get to the root of his pain. He tells him to take off his shirt and lie down so he can explain the treatment process. Damien does as he's told, revealing a back covered in scars. Our boy playfully asks if he's scared, but he gets an irritated no in response. He adds that as a warrior, he's given as good as he's gotten, which shuts our hero up. He then scoops up a chunk of moxibustion and asks if it's his first time seeing such a thing. Our guy places the moxibustion on his back. Then he sets the substance on fire, while Damien nonchalantly remarks that a little treatment like this won't scare a warrior. However, after just a moment, he is trembling from the pain, and our boy can't help but crack a joke. In all seriousness, he hopes Damien can bear it, thinking about the curse mark on his back that keeps him trapped in the underworld. Whenever he goes into a fight, he feels excruciating pain, forcing him to rely on loads of painkillers to cope. He has to borrow money, which means he has to fight again just to pay off his debt. This is the vicious cycle the protagonist is trapped in. He curses Kuzman for forcing this cruel life on Damien, hoping this process will burn the mark right off his back. He thinks to himself that if he can successfully cure Damien, he won't just extend his lifespan, he'll also gain a powerful ally. He decides he'll treat the other gladiators after this. Once the treatment is done, he tells him to get up and intently inspects the mark, which he has successfully cauterized. He then asks how he's feeling right now. With a look of utter disbelief, Damien expresses that he feels completely refreshed, something he hasn't felt in a very long time. Our boy explains that he'll need several more sessions. In the meantime, he must avoid touching the blisters, eating oily food, and overexerting himself. That last demand catches him off guard. Our hero clarifies that this means no fighting, which Damien protests, saying Kuzman will never allow it. To that, he reassures him, saying that he'll handle that matter personally. Damien now realizes our guy isn't who he claimed to be, and with a baffled expression asks for his real identity. Our boy proudly tells him that he is the crown prince, but Damien doesn't buy it, remarking that he must have a reason for hiding who he is. Our boy decides to drop the subject and just instructs Damien to follow his orders. He also strictly warns him to stay away from the Colosseum no matter what, explaining it's for his own safety. In the end, he adds that from now on, this is the only way they can meet. Hearing this, Damien's face turns beet red as he eagerly agrees. On the way back, Garden is bursting with questions, but our hero just asks for his help finding someone. When asked who, he describes a man with black hair, a ponytail, and slitted eyes. After checking a few spots, they finally find their man in a bar. He sits down in front of him and gets right to the point, saying he wants to buy out Damien's contract and asking for the total, including his debt and the cancellation fee. At that, Kuzman demands a staggering 9 trillion minen, an amount only someone as ridiculously wealthy as a crown prince could afford. Our boy explains that, as a matter of fact, he is the crown prince. The man starts laughing in his face, saying that if Raquel is a crown prince, then he's the pope of selling medicine. He then tells him to scram if he's not going to buy anything. As our boy leaves, the man calls over a subordinate and tells him to investigate the kid and find out who he is. He even gives him permission to use torture to get the information. About 1 hour later, the very same man he sent is thrown at his feet, bloody and beaten. He is completely baffled to see his subordinate in this state and demands to know who did this to him. Just then, he spots the royal guards who announce the arrival of the secret royal inspector. Our hero then dramatically pulls off his wig and flashes the royal badge. Flashing back to 1 hour ago, we see Gordon and our boy walking, fully aware that one of Kuzman's men is tailing them. He tells Gordon to act natural so their follower doesn't realize he's been made. He knew it was inevitable. That Kuzman would send someone after him, which was precisely why he approached him in the first place. The next moment, the stalker turns a corner and runs smack into the secret royal inspector. The royal guards immediately accuse the stalker of attempting to assassinate the crown prince. And that brings us back to the present, as they all stand before Kuzman. Our boy hands the badge back to the inspector while Kuzman is still trying to process what's happening. But before he can react, our hero orders the royal guards to raid the entire place and capture Kuzman. At his command, the guards immediately rush in to secure the area. Watching the scene unfold, Gordon thinks to himself that the crown prince really has changed. He's now genuinely concerned about national security, which explains why he's cracking down on underground organizations. The crown prince, on the other hand, looks absolutely delighted to see the brawl break out. After all, if his allies get injured, he'll have a chance to heal them. It's a golden opportunity to extend his lifespan. Meanwhile, Kuzman scurries into a corner, trying to figure out a plan. As he tries to find an escape route, he can't help but wonder about the crown prince's strange interest in buying Damien. He makes a break for a gate, planning to lie low until the heat dies down. But the moment he yanks the door open, he finds himself staring down the points of several swords. On the other side of the door, our guy is collecting on a bet he made with his doctor that Kuzman would come through this exact gate. He cheerfully demands 500 Megan from the poor doctor. He then steps forward and starts rambling about the importance of paying for one's medical bills. When Kuzman screams at him, asking what kind of nonsense he's spouting, he clarifies that he came with good intentions to settle Damien's bill and even offered a good deal, but Kuzman was the one who threw it all away. Hearing this, Kuzman becomes enraged and lunges at him, only for his face to meet the iron fist of a royal guard. The next moment, he's on the ground, being warned not to move. With no escape route, he decides to use his last resort, a poison capsule bomb hidden in his mouth. His plan is to spit the capsule out, and 5 seconds later, the poison gas will paralyze everyone nearby. With everyone incapacitated, he'll be able to escape and kill the crown prince. He's quite pleased with his brilliant plan. He's about to spit the capsule, counting down from 5 to 1. But just before he can, Raquel clamps a hand over his mouth. Kuzman realizes with horror that the prince knew his every move. At that exact moment, the bomb goes off inside his mouth. The paralysis starts to set in, and he knows he needs to take the antidote immediately. With trembling hands, he fumbles in his pocket for it. But our hero, who knows everything from the novel, snatches the antidote from his hand and teases him about whether he wants to know his source. To the goon's absolute horror, our protagonist chugs the antidote right in front of him while giving him a little poke, as he emphasizes that he has no intention of telling him. To taunt him even more, he complains about the antidote's bitter taste. While Kuzman is desperate to get the antidote, our boy casually tosses it over his shoulder. He implies that he's not going to give him the antidote, especially since Rocky was the one who poisoned him in the first place. His real plan is to use his medical treatment skills to extend his own lifespan now that he has the antidote stored in his mana slots. Now targeting the area under the 5th thoracic vertebra, he presses about 1.5 inches deep on both sides, stimulating the heart transporter points. With that, Kuzman spits up the poison. He then administers the antidote into his system and waits for it to take effect. After a few seconds, Kuzmin loses consciousness, a sign that our guy has successfully treated him. As a reward, his lifespan is extended by 118 days. He then orders his guards to arrest them. Now he can move on to his main reason for coming here. The scene shifts to the gladiators led by Damien, who are fighting the guards and managing to injure several of them. At this moment, Raquel makes an appearance before him, and he's recognized instantly. The scene changes to a dream, showing a young Damien standing before his deceased mother. He knows he's dreaming of the day he was left all alone. Just then, a voice tells him to wake up, and as he opens his eyes, he finds himself in front of Garden, who introduces himself. Damen shares his name as well as they shake hands. Our crown prince cuts their introduction short and tells them both to follow him, saying they have a lot to do. Afterwards, they arrive at a Moxibustion clinic. They find the other gladiators there too. Damen asks where on earth they are. He answers that it's a treatment clinic. Another gladiator wonders aloud why he's being so nice to them, noting that he didn't just shelter them in his palace after rescuing them from the underworld, but is also planning to treat them. Looking at them, he thinks to himself that his main reason for treating these gladiators is to free them from their curse marks. By doing this, he can extend his own lifespan, as treating young people gives him a significant boost. He starts by saying he isn't doing this out of goodwill, because everyone knows he's quite a sick person himself. One of them chimes in that everyone in the kingdom knows it, and our guy mentally promises that this man will receive the most painful treatment. Anyway, he continues, saying that since doctors failed to find a cure for him, he's taking matters into his own hands. He then turns to Damien and asks if he understands what he's getting at. Damien answers that they're here to be his test subjects, which he confirms. Everyone is clearly worried to hear this, but our guy counters by asking Damen how he felt after the last treatment. Damon replies that he felt relief from his nerve pain. Upon hearing this, everyone visibly relaxes, reassured by Damien's positive testimony in the Crown Prince's favor. He then asks all the gladiators if they're feeling hesitant about his proposed treatment. When met with silence, he tells them to take off their shirts and get on the beds. 6 days later, every single gladiator looks like they've been through the ringer. They're all suffering from intense withdrawal, constantly throwing up and breaking out in cold sweats from the lack of painkillers. Our MC is pretty anxious to see how his treatment is panning out. He turns to Damien asking if he's feeling dizzy or nauseous. Damien admits that he is, but says he's managing to hold on. It clicks for him, then Damien is the exception, which makes sense since he's the novel's protagonist for a reason. He dismisses everyone back to their quarters, but tells Sergio to stay behind. He points out how rough Sergio looks due to withdrawal, but Sergio just tries to brush it off, insisting he's fine. Our boy then reveals a needle, telling him this will help. Internally, however, he's not so sure if the acupressure treatment will even work on Sergio, who's been on the painkillers longer than anyone else. That makes him the perfect, if unwilling, test subject. He considers targeting an acupuncture point near his stomach. But while he's lost in thought, Sergio suddenly gets to his feet, looking dangerously powerful. He lunges at our MC, grabbing him by the throat with both hands. Just as Raquel starts struggling to breathe, Damien swoops in at the last second and knocks Sergio away. Damien then offers a hand to help him up. He asks if Raquel's okay, and our guy says he is. Looking at the now unconscious Sergio, he figures that the severe withdrawal has made him hypersensitive to any kind of stimulation. That must be why even a tiny needle would feel like a sword stabbing him. To solve this, he's going to need much thinner needles. A little while later, we see him in his study reading a letter from a blacksmith. The gist of the letter is that the blacksmith is apologizing because he can't produce needles as thin as a thread. The blacksmith adds that only a master dwarf artisan could pull off a feat like that. Just then, a system notification pops up warning him that his stress levels are so high he's at risk of a nervous breakdown. It seems his own body is trying to calm him down while also giving him a little nudge. Noticing he's stuck, the system helpfully reminds him that he can use his HP to either summon a monster or unlock a new skill. He immediately goes for the Summon Gotcha option, which costs 300 HP. As he confirms the purchase, he crosses his fingers for a good roll. The system then prompts him to state the qualities he wants in his summon. He asks for a creature that can provide him with a large supply of uniformly thin needles. After his request is logged, the system presents 3 options with some truly bizarre names: a happy summon that oinks, iron that discharges, and a cactus that discharges. His system then informs him that one of the summons has a 100% chance of meeting his needs. Another has a 50% chance, and the last one has a 0% chance. He quickly realizes this whole thing is a gamble. So naturally, he starts overthinking which one to pick. After agonizing over the choice, his own heart practically yells at him to just pick the cactus, so he does. As the system prepares his summon, he sends a quick prayer to the gacha gods. A moment later, an adorable little porcupine appears in his palm. The system then begins to detail the stats and abilities of his new summon. He can change its size by feeding it red sunflower seeds, which make it enormous, or blue seeds, which shrink it back to its original tiny size. Its name is Ghost You, and it has the ability to produce an infinite number of thorns to attack its enemies. He politely asks his summon for 3 different colored thorns, and it happily provides them. He examines the white and brown ones first. The white thorn has a mild pain effect, so he figures it'll be perfect for the gladiators. However, he's a little wary of the black one as it has a much higher pain level. Deciding not to even test it, he saves it for a special someone later, before heading to his clinic to warm up the needle. Seeing him, Gordon asks about his new summon, so he makes the introduction. He quickly concocts a story, and tells Gordon to get the rest of the details from the summon itself, then makes a swift exit. Gordon is completely baffled, since he recognizes the creature as a summoned monster. According to legend, a legendary builder from about 300 years ago used summoned monsters to help him. They're known to be incredibly rare and mysterious creatures, so Gordon has no idea how his master got one. He's now realizing there's more to his master than meets the eye. Inside the clinic, Sergio apologizes to our hero for what happened yesterday. He waves off the apology, telling him that he won't feel a thing, since he's already inserted a bunch of needles into his body. Our protagonist is surprised to hear this because Sergio genuinely doesn't seem to feel anything. Sergio then shows him his arm right where he performed the acupuncture treatment. After that success, he starts performing this treatment on everyone. As a reward for treating Damien and the other gladiators, his life expectancy increases by 171 days. And that's not all. He also levels up his skill for having used it on so many people. He's clearly thrilled by this news, and his body language gives it all away. Seeing him so overjoyed, Damien can't quite figure out his true motives, wondering why the Crown Prince is so ecstatic about their recovery. Now that Raquel is finished with their treatment, he decides it's time to come up with another plan for them. The scene shifts to the Emperor, who is receiving a report about his son. He's informed that the Crown Prince has taken on 14 gladiators as bodyguards who are now officially recognized as royal guards. The prince is even providing them with salaries and other benefits for their service. At this, the Emperor starts laughing at his son's expense. The boy is supposed to be on bed rest, but instead he's building his own private army. However, the next bit of information makes him tense up. He's told that the Crown Prince has a new hobby, inviting every servant and guard over to poke them with needles. We then see the Crown Prince playing doctor with a whole line of servants. He asks one of them if the needles he's sticking into his body hurt, and gets a no for an answer, even though the guard's pained expression says otherwise. Then he cheerfully calls out for the next patient. A few days later, Damien is with our Crown Prince, who asks how the moxibustion treatments have been feeling. Damien replies that it still hurts a little. The Crown Prince then shares the good news that he's fully cured and no longer needs treatment, which leaves Damien utterly confused. He then thanks the Crown Prince, but his gratitude is met with a protest. Raquel asks him to just hear him out first. The Crown Prince has a proposal for him, wanting Damien's sword skills on his side so they don't go to waste. He then offers him a position as his personal bodyguard with an attractive salary and other benefits rather than relying on emotional appeals like loyalty and friendship. He knows that Damien will continue to advance his sword skills and will soon reach the Swordmaster stage where his senses will become extremely sensitive, causing him to endure even more pain than he experienced with the curse seal. That's why he wants Damien to stay close by when that happens, so the job offer is really just an excuse to keep him by his side, and he even adds a ton of other perks to the contract. But when Damien doesn't respond, he offers a 4-day work week, which earns a loud cheer from everyone behind Damien. Upon hearing about the job's amazing perks, everyone else offers to work for him too, pretending it's their way of repaying their debt by protecting him. He dryly comments that they just want to do it for the salary and benefits, and they all sincerely agree that's exactly the case. He's actually glad they're so honest, thinking that people who make a big deal about loyalty are often the ones who hold grudges. So he mulls it over and decides to hire them, since the original royal guards were all loyal to his father anyway. It would be much better to have his own private squad. He then gives them the name SRG, and they are all pretty happy about it. He turns away from them and sighs, thinking that his own lifespan is still critically short, with only 18 days left on top of having a body too weak to search for more patients. A little while later, he's in his study, telling Damien and Garden that he's going to set up a clinic in his palace. Hearing this, Garden startles him by praising his noble cause, assuming he just wants to help sick people. The prince plays along, agreeing that he wants to treat the people living within the side palace, since commoners from outside probably wouldn't feel comfortable visiting. Garden also agrees with this reasoning, so the prince explains that this will help spread the word and serve as advertising for his clinic. That way people will eventually come to his side palace's traditional medicine clinic to get treated. Back in the present, he's frustrated to find that everyone is remarkably healthy. After treating 500 people, he's only gained a 2-day life extension. In his frustration, he exclaims that he needs someone who is seriously ill. Suddenly, he stops as an idea hits him. He orders Garden to gather data on the families of all the servants working in his palace. He's sure there must be at least one sick person among them. He gets more and more frustrated, seeing how healthy they all are, with only 10 pages of files left to review. He's losing hope, but he keeps checking through the documents anyway. He's interrupted by Damien, who expresses his disappointment with the Crown Prince. The prince is baffled. Damien asks him if he just views patients as tools. Damien adds that he understands needing patients for research, but this, he says, looks more like he's actively searching for someone on their deathbed. At that, Garden tries to defend his master, insisting that he must have a plan. However, the Crown Prince corrects his doctor, stating that Damien is absolutely right in his assumption. Damien protests that the prince was being rude to Garden, while Garden argues back that Damien is the one being rude to the prince. Seeing this, the Crown Prince watches them argue. The prince shoos both of them out of his room and gets back to reviewing the last 10 pages. Just then, one particular page catches his eye. It's a questionnaire detailing the case of an 8-year-old boy who suffers from strange fits, trembling and foaming at the mouth once or twice a week. Both doctors and clerics have examined him, but none could figure out what was wrong. Reading this, the prince can't help but smile. This is exactly the kind of case he was hoping to find. The very next day, he arranges a meeting with the young boy, who seems understandably intimidated by royalty. To put him at ease, the prince warmly introduces himself, telling the boy to just call him Raquel. He can tell it's George's first time visiting the palace, let alone meeting the Crown Prince. So his top priority is making the little guy feel comfortable. He offers him a piece of candy, which makes the boy's face light up for a moment, but his expression quickly turns sour. The boy explains that he's not allowed to touch the Crown Prince. When Raquel asks why, George quietly admits it's because he's been cursed. He adds that because of this curse, the other kids bully him and call him weird. Hearing this, Raquel quickly tries to reassure the boy, telling him that's not true at all. But George explains that just yesterday some kids were teasing him, and when he tried to stand up for himself, he lost the fight. After that, everything went dark and he suddenly started trembling, feeling as if someone had thrown him hard onto the ground. He felt completely drained when he finally came to. Hearing his story, the Crown Prince pulls the boy into a sudden hug, telling him how brave he is for enduring all this. With tears welling up in his eyes, George insists that Raquel shouldn't touch him because of the evil spirit living inside him. At that very moment, the Crown Prince begins his own unique diagnosis. His system interface informs him that the boy is completely healthy, aside from seizure-like symptoms caused by irregular brainwaves. He quickly diagnoses George with a condition he knows as epilepsy. The real problem, however, is figuring out what's causing those irregular brainwaves in the first place. He looks at George and tells him firmly that there's nothing strange about him. Sensing the boy's disbelief, Raquel puffs out his chest and cheerfully declares that, as the Crown Prince, he's basically always right. That said, he's now stumped on what to do next. He can't pinpoint the cause of the irregular brainwaves without modern tools like an MRI machine, which obviously don't exist here. Suddenly, George cries out and Raquel tenses up as he realizes the boy is having a seizure right in front of him. He immediately lays the boy down, ignoring Gordon's frantic protests to stay away from him. Seeing the commotion, Daman draws his sword ready to keep everyone else at a distance. Raquel shouts at his guards, reminding them that George is just a sick child who is in pain and needs care, not suspicion. He then orders them to quickly bring him a pillow. After carefully placing George's head on the pillow, he notices everyone is just staring at him, unsure of what to do. When Gordon offers to wipe the foam from the boy's mouth, Raquel stops him, explaining that George could accidentally swallow the hand towel. For now, there's nothing they can do but wait for the seizure to pass. But then Raquel notices something strange, a faint flow of mana coming from George. He realizes his Azrahan core technique, which is highly sensitive to mana, is what's allowing him to see this. An idea strikes him. He can use this very technique to trace the mana and find the true cause of the epilepsy. Focusing his senses, he dives into the boy's internal mana flow, searching for the source of the problem. He meticulously checks the nerves but finds nothing, and the effort is quickly starting to drain him. His consciousness follows the mana flow until it leads him right to George's heart, and he rushes toward it. And there, finally, he finds it. The source of the irregular brain waves is a blockage in the vagus nerve. Once the seizure subsides, he orders his subordinates to bring a blanket to cover George. He also gives them strict instructions to let the boy rest and not to wake him under any circumstances. In the process, he overexerts himself during the diagnosis and collapses. Everyone around him is worried, but he's just relieved that he figured out the cause of George's illness before passing out. A few hours later, he wakes up with a heavy head. He figures his Azrahan core must have been working overtime while he was asleep. Just then, he's startled by Damien's presence, who informs him that he's been sleeping for half a day. He asks about George and learns that he has woken up but is now feeling exhausted. As he gets out of bed, he reflects on how his Azrahan core made the diagnosis a success. Now he can start George's treatment by stimulating the vagus nerve. As he's putting on his coat, a surprised Damien asks where he's going in the middle of the night. With a crazed look on his face, he announces that he's going to get struck by lightning. A little later, he and Damien show up in front of the main palace. The guards are shocked to see him there. He asks the guards to escort them to Sirenet's room. They proceed to the room of Sirenet, the palace mage. He is astonished to see them so late at night and asks why they're there. The crown prince then playfully asks the mage to strike his back with lightning magic, leaving the poor mage completely baffled. The mage remembers yesterday when he visited the emperor, who was telling him how the crown prince has been acting so strangely lately. The emperor said with a smile that he was worried about what his son might do next. Seeing his expression, the mage thinks with annoyance that the emperor is just as much of a doting fool when it comes to his son. Back in the present, the boy is furiously shaking the annoyed mage while demanding to be hit with lightning. The mage can't help but think the crown prince has gone completely mad. He protests that he can't do it as it might kill him, which would make the mage responsible for his death. The crown prince explains that it doesn't need to be that powerful. He just needs a bit of electrical stimulation for 3 hours. The mage is just as annoyed by this new request. Lightning magic is destructive, but the prince wants him to tone it down and control it for 3 hours, which requires incredible precision. He asks the prince if he has any idea how difficult that request is. The crown prince says he understands completely, which is why he came to him. No one else could possibly pull off such a feat. Hearing the compliment, the mage is already half convinced to go along with it, but he's still hesitant, worried that he might accidentally hurt him. The crown prince reassures him, guaranteeing that if anything goes wrong, the mage won't be held accountable. While pointing to the guards, who will serve as witnesses, he adds that he's doing this to save someone. The mage finally agrees to his demand and asks when they should start. The crown prince replies that they need to do it now. He then sits in front of the mage, who asks if he's ready. He nods secretly, thinking that he can't just test such a dangerous treatment on a child, so it's better to experiment on himself first. When the mage starts to hit him with a precise amount of electricity, the crown prince is going to convert the electrical currents into magical electrodes. Then he intends to transform them into precise electrical signals, to use them to correct the irregular signals in George's vagus nerve. In the end, he will control those signals. While analyzing his plan, he's in awe of the Azrahan core technique, which makes it possible for him to succeed in one try. He asks the mage to stop, who teasingly tells him that he could do this all day. The next day, a crowd of known gossips is seen in front of his room. One of them opens the door, and now everyone is standing before George and his doctor, the crown prince. Raquel shows George a needle, and frankly tells him that it's going to hurt a little as it is a medical procedure. He then reassures him that it won't hurt much, since he already stuck one needle in his neck and George didn't even realize it. He adds that what's coming next, however, will definitely hurt. Then the mage zaps Raquel with electric magic, and he gathers the electricity in his heart. Garden feels like he's about to faint just from seeing his master's condition. But our dude's focus remains on the gossips in the room, as he's hoping they will spread the word about his treatment method everywhere. After receiving the electric current, it's now time to transfer it to George. However, he tenses up when he detects that George's mana flow is becoming erratic. With dread, he realizes that George is about to have a seizure, so he must correct the nerve before it happens. George asks how much longer he has to stay like this. He answers that he has only 3 minutes, or if things go south, just 1 minute. But overall, the procedure will take 30 minutes. For a moment, he thinks about pausing the treatment, but decides against it for several reasons. Because of the gossips present who could fuel strange rumors and the uncertainty of how much longer the mage will continue to help him. He finally resolves to proceed and turns to the mage, asking him to triple the power level of the magic. The mage warns him that it will hurt more, but he brushes off the concern. However, this time he is struck by lightning. Yet he focuses on the task at hand. He needs to absorb the mana in order to complete the procedure as quickly as possible. He searches for the carotid artery to place the electrode, knowing that only 5 seconds remain before the seizure starts. Finally, just when it seems like George is about to have a seizure, he instead returns to normal and looks at the Crown Prince. Everyone, especially George's sister, is amazed to see that the seizure doesn't happen. Meanwhile, the Crown Prince is quietly exhausted from the constant electric stimulation. However, his system congratulates him for successfully performing the vagus nerve operation. He receives a 3-day life bonus as a reward. Not only that, his Azrahan core technique levels up by surpassing his body's limit, now reaching level 2 in a single circle, which also increases his mana circle. He then gets a notification that his lungs and large intestine have absorbed metal energy and gained immunity to wood magic. To use this wood energy, his new organ, the liver, awakens. At that moment, a very angry and arrogant liver enters the organ realm, making the large intestine happy that he's no longer the newbie. But instead of being friendly, the liver delivers a slap to the large intestine and deadpans that he better not call him a newbie if he doesn't have a death wish. The next moment, he grants our boy 300 HP. Our boy's other organs also grant 500 HP after welcoming their new counterpart. Not only that, but it seems like his organs are quite happy as he has also received an additional 300 HP because they're throwing a birthday party for the liver. He's quite pleased to snag all of these achievements and extra HP in one day. He wonders if there's anything else, but his system gives him a negative. Just then, George addresses him, asking if he's some kind of weirdo. The little kid explains that normally, when he feels strange, he loses control, but it didn't happen this time. At that, Raquel explains that it won't happen from now on, as he will no longer suffer from any kind of fit. He even stakes his claim to the Crown Prince title on it. Listening to all of this, George's sister, standing in the crowd, becomes quite emotional. George turns to her and gives her a loving hug. Raquel tells everyone it was a successful operation, which makes them emotional too. He hopes that these people will spread the news of George's treatment far and wide. That way, he'll soon face a swarm of patients, which will result in bonus life. Suddenly, his vision blurs, and he loses consciousness due to the stress his body has gone through. He regains consciousness that night and sees the Garden Palace mage and Damien standing in front of him. He jokingly asks if they don't have anything better to do than watch him sleep. Garden states with a sad expression that this is pretty much the case because Raquel has been asleep for 2 days, which leaves him baffled. The mage also chimes in, accusing him of intending to have him executed. He then asks with a horrified expression how he's going. To explain the Crown Prince's condition to the Emperor, which happened because of the lightning magic he used on him. Our dude nervously apologizes to all of them. He then asks about George, and at that moment, George appears in his room. He explains that he nagged Garden to allow him in, then gives him a handmade wooden locket. Seeing his effort, our guy feels a little ashamed, because he didn't help George out of goodwill, but to extend his own life. He tries to say something, but George interrupts, claiming that he wants to help others, just like Raquel. This statement leaves him completely stunned. He then compliments his necklace and states that seeing George healthy is the greatest reward for him. Then he dismisses everyone, saying that he wants to rest a little longer. So everyone leaves the room while George bids him farewell. Once everyone leaves, he looks at the necklace with annoyance, wondering who would want to wear something so plain. However, as if mocking his own statement, he finds himself wearing it as he sleeps. The scene shifts to a commoner's house, where a mother asks her son why he's there when he should be at work. The boy enters while greeting his parents, and tells them that he's on special leave from the Crown Prince. It seems he's part of a group of town gossips, and the Crown Prince has given him leave to spread the news about his strange treatment methods. Afterwards, the boy informs his parents about how he and the others were given a special 5-day leave. He also mentions that the Crown Prince is doing strange things like wanting to treat people. Then he shows them the paper. It's a pamphlet in which the Crown Prince announces the opening of his medical clinic in his side palace and offers all kinds of treatment for free. Meanwhile, back at the palace, our guy is stoked to see the fruits of his rumor spreading, but Gordon pops in, reminding him it's time to go. On the way, Gordon remarks that he's up bright and early. Raquel replies that it's just because it's his first day at the clinic. Gordon informs him that he's stocked up on all the medicine, including the hard-to-get licorice. Hearing this, our guy praises him, adding that he needs licorice for a ton of things. So he tells him to stock up on as much of it as possible. Gordon nods, wondering aloud where the Crown Prince could have possibly learned about potion making and acupressure treatments. He adds that he's dying to know, especially since he's a doctor himself. He admits he's lost countless nights of sleep trying to research the prince's methods, but he's come up with nothing, which is super frustrating. As a fellow, Dr. Raquel totally gets Gordon's frustration over being in the dark about these new techniques. He then drops the bomb. He's actually from another world where he ran a traditional medicine clinic, which explains everything. But Gordon doesn't buy it for a second and demands the real story. Raquel insists he's being 100% truthful and asks why Gordon is so hung up on it. Gordon answers with fiery determination that he wants the satisfaction of becoming an amazing doctor, just like Raquel. In response, our boy tells him he's already on that path and gently orders him to go on ahead. As Gordon walks away, Raquel reflects that his loyal aide is a huge reason he's even made it this far. His thoughts then turn to the new clinic and he silently prays for a full house. He's worried all the stress is going to give him some serious PTSD. He swings open the door, ready to greet his patients with a cheerful welcome. But his face falls when he sees the waiting room is completely empty. But then Gordon tells him to look down, and he's floored to see a massive crowd outside all trying to get in. A little while later, he's in the middle of diagnosing a patient when his servant checks in on him. He tells him to go check on the other patients and see if they need anything. Next, he spots a maid preparing the medicine incorrectly. He knows the nursing system isn't quite up to snuff yet and that it'll take time to smooth things out. After seeing a bunch of patients, he finally gains enough experience to level up his pulse reading skill. Now, not only can he assess a patient's overall health, but he can also detect specific symptoms related to their internal organs. Basically, his own internal organs are going to help him diagnose patients by having a little chat with their organs. The scene then shifts to his organ realm, where everyone is getting ready for a blind date with the patient's organs. The heart declares he's not interested in anyone more than 4 years younger or older. However, the liver points out that they're about to meet an old man's organs, and suddenly everyone's enthusiasm for the consultation plummets. Despite their grumbling, they report their findings. They didn't find any major issues aside from a mild case of constipation. But the liver chimes in that the patient is showing signs of hepatitis and really needs to lay off the booze. The liver adds that at this rate, the old man's liver only has about 5 years left. Raquel is amazed to hear this. Detailed diagnosis, realizing it's the key to planning any effective treatment. Fired up, he decides it's time to awaken his other organs too. He turns to his patient, explains what's going on with his liver, and prescribes medicine for 10 days. To top it off, he deadpans that the man needs to quit drinking, otherwise he'll probably be dead in 5 years. Then, pulling rank as the Crown Prince, he orders the patient to quit alcohol or face being thrown in jail. Hearing this, the man is absolutely terrified. After that, he dismisses all the non-critical patients and sends them home. Then the servants approach him, showering him with praise and apologizing for their past mistakes. A bit flustered, he encourages them and acknowledges their hard work. Meanwhile, he's thinking about establishing a proper nursing system, since it'll be necessary if they start taking in more patients. He wishes his nurses from the modern world were here to help. At that moment, Garden bursts through the door, urgently telling him there's a patient who needs immediate care. The woman's son begs him to save his mother. After getting her settled on the bed, he asks the son about her condition. The son replies that she's had a fever since the afternoon, and her condition has only gotten worse. After checking her veins, he is horrified as he realizes she might be suffering from the same illness that wiped out 40,000 of Napoleon's soldiers. With dread, he recognizes her condition as epidemic. Typhus fever, an acute febrile illness caused by a Rickettsia bacteria infection. He hesitates to accept it, but the liver informs him that it has in fact detected Rickettsia bacteria in her blood. He gulps upon hearing this and asks the patient's son when she last took a bath. The son replies that she bathed just yesterday. He then asks about the condition of her bedding. The son answers that she's a very tidy and clean person. Finding no clues, he asks if she's been anywhere recently where she might have come into contact with lice or fleas. The son then answers that she had slept on a farmer couple's bed when her carriage broke down on her way home about 15 days ago. Putting it all together, he concludes that it must be epidemic typhus fever. He then informs the son about his mother's condition, explaining that she was infected by lice. Considering her age and high temperature, he concludes that she's at risk for pneumonia, central nervous system damage, or even developing necrosis. He then instructs the maids to give the patient a sponge bath with warm water and change her into a clean gown. He orders them to burn all of her clothes and bedding, bathe themselves thoroughly, and then burn the clothes they're wearing too. He even threatens to fire and punish anyone who disobeys. He then orders the son to inform the rest of the family about her condition. Later, we find him in the kitchen, having prepared a kudzu root tonic soup, a type of fever reducer and pain reliever for his patient. He then gives her the first dose of the soup. 3 days pass, and despite their round-the-clock care, her condition doesn't improve due to the persistent high fever. He now understands that the soup alone isn't enough to treat her condition. She needs a balance of yin and yang, as her yin energy has been completely drained. He realizes he must find a medicine with strong yin energy to restore her body's balance. He racks his brain trying to think of where he could find such a medicine. Realizing it might be in his father's secret treasure vault, he orders Garden to prepare a carriage. He isn't sure he'll find it there or not, but he plans to use his crown prince privilege, hoping his father might help him out. A short while later, he greets his father, who asks why he's visiting so late at night. He asks for permission to enter the secret palace vault. Sensing his father's confusion, he reveals the condition of his current patient, who is critically ill. His father asks what this has to do with his request to visit the vault. He explains that he's searching for a cure for her and thinks he might find something useful there. In response, his father expresses his disbelief, suspecting he's just making an excuse to access the vault for his own personal gain. Meanwhile, his father seems to be enjoying his son's predicament, which our crown prince notices and finds incredibly annoying given his father's usual antics. He tries to reason with his father, insisting that he doesn't have time to waste on this. However, his father remains unconvinced, arguing that since he never received a proper education, he has no business suddenly treating people. His father then asks him to prove his diagnosis is correct. At this, our boy asks if he's being tested, which the Emperor confirms. He then orders our boy to diagnose the condition of Royal Knight Captain Roberto, who has recently fallen ill. If his diagnosis is correct, he will be granted access to the vault. He checks the captain's pulse, while his arrogant father smugly assumes that he won't be able to determine the condition, as only he, the captain, and the captain's wife know about it. After just a few seconds, our boy announces that the captain is suffering from partial baldness, which shocks both the captain and the Emperor. The Emperor scoffs, pointing out the captain's full head of shiny hair. In response, our hero simply yanks off the captain's wig. This leaves the captain looking utterly devastated, as if he's about to have a breakdown. Having proven his point, our hero turns to Daman and tells him it's time to go. On their way to the vault, Daman remarks on how harsh it was to just snatch the captain's wig. He casually replies that he'll just treat the baldness next time. As they're talking, they finally arrive at the vault. The guards hand him the secret pass to enter. He curiously asks what happens to someone who tries to get in without one. The guard explains that it triggers the attack magic inside the vault and also tracks his time. If he exceeds the allowed time limit, he will be killed. Finally, the guard informs him that he is only allowed inside the vault until dawn. Shocked to hear this, he realizes they only have a few hours to search. So he rushes toward the vault, only to be stopped by the guard, who informs him that he's heading toward the intermediate area. Annoyed that his little ploy didn't work, he remembers that his father only granted him access to the basic area where he can only take one item. Frustrated, he complains that his father tricked him by not mentioning the area restrictions when he set up the test. Still annoyed with his scheming father, he resolves to avoid asking for his help in the future. Once inside, they are both stunned by the vault's enormous size. He sets a timer for their deadline and turns to Daman for help. Daman asks how they're supposed to find what they need in such a huge place. He replies that they're looking for anything with ice-based properties. Once Daman finds anything that fits the description, he should write down its location so he can check it out later. They then split up to cover more ground. However, our protagonist comes up empty-handed and pins his hopes on Daman finding something. His bodyguard approaches, and the prince asks about the list. Daman hands it over, but our hero quickly realizes he can't read it. So Daman leads him to the location of the shield he discovered. This is the only item in the vault with ice properties. He examines the shield's description, noting that it's just a basic item. When infused with mana, it can manifest an ice shield. It looks more like a coffee shop pager, but his eyes are glued to the description detailing how it manifests an ice shield when infused with mana. With that, he begins to infuse his mana into the device to test it out. The item starts buzzing as he channels his mana, and he's careful not to overdo it, knowing it has a limit on how much mana it can handle to deploy the shield. Then he infuses his mana into it again, this time more, carefully as if he were dialing in the perfect shower temperature back in his previous life. He starts to feel a chill, and then success. An ice shield materializes in front of him. He happily turns to his bodyguard, letting him know he'll need his help with something later. Now it's time to head to his bonus HP, in other words, his patient. A moment later, the guards see him and his bodyguard emerging from the vault, and they can't help but notice the sword at Damon's belt. One guard asks if they chose that sword, but they're interrupted by the crown prince, who is draped in countless jewels and a velvet cape worthy of an emperor. The newcomer gives our hero an annoyed look and informs our dude that he's supposed to be stripped of all his finery. Later, inside a side palace, Garden is woken up by a noise and sees that Damon and the crown prince have returned. Seeing them together, he feels pleased, believing that Damon is more than capable enough to protect Raquel, and that Raquel has also found a true friend in him. With this heartwarming thought, he makes some tea and brings it downstairs for them. However, he drops the tea in shock the moment he sees Raquel activate the shield while Damon attacks him with a sword. He immediately exclaims that this is an act of treason. Let's rewind a few minutes to when the crown prince told Damon he needed his help with something. Damon, who was genuinely impressed by the crown prince's passion for treating people, was prepared to follow any of his orders. But the second the crown prince asks him to strike Raquel with his sword until the ice shield breaks, his expression instantly sours. This was the same argument Garden had overheard from his room without catching all the details. Damon protests, asking if the crown prince really wants to brand him as a traitor, but the crown prince explains that he needs to be struck with the sword to break the shield so that he can use the residue left behind from the impact in the medicine for his patient. Hearing this, Damon suggests just putting the shield on the ground so he can strike it more easily. The crown prince explains that's impossible, as he has to constantly infuse it with mana to maintain the shield. Damon then concludes that the crown prince needs him to break the shield without actually harming him. Being the smart guy he is, Damon demands a bonus for every strike he lands. He explains that what the crown prince is asking could get him branded a traitor, so he can't do it without proper compensation. Raquel snobbishly asks if Damon seriously wants to be paid for hitting him. Damon politely responds that while he deeply respects the crown prince for helping people, this is a separate matter, and he expects to be paid. Our guy really gets it. His demands make sense, since he knows Damien has faced a ton of financial trouble that made his life miserable. So it makes perfect sense that he'd ask for something in return. Raquel then gives Damon a hug, happily exclaiming that he's just like the story said, which makes Damon's expression totally sour. With that, he puts up the shield and tells him that Damien will get a full day's salary for every single strike. Damon says he hopes he'll get paid on time as he starts wailing on him with his sword. Meanwhile, witnessing the scene unfold, our poor guard has completely passed out. After the first hit, Damon tells him that he is going to ramp up the power of his attacks since his current strength might not be enough to break the shield. Damon pauses his attack when he sees the crown prince, who looks like he's in serious pain. Damon reminds him that he hasn't even attacked for real yet, and the shield still hasn't broken from his strike. Damon asks if he should power up even more, but our boy accuses him of trying to rack up his bonus by landing a bunch of weak hits. This really fires up the bodyguard, and this time he finally shatters the shield. The moment he sees that our hero starts dancing like a maniac, thrilled about getting more bonus life, when he turns to go into the palace, he spots the passed-out guard and wonders why he's sleeping there. A little later, he's seen whipping up a classic kudu root tonic soup, to which he's also added fragments of the ice shield. Then he decides to store some of it in his mana slots. His system notifies him that he's acquired a new skill called Tonic Concoction. With this skill, not only will the tonics he creates be 10% more effective, but he can also analyze their effectiveness, toxicity, and any other side effects. When he stores the tonic, his system asks if he wants to use his skill to analyze it, and he agrees. The system then displays the description, informing him that the tonic can restore water energy and reduce fever, along with some warnings about its use. He's pretty happy to see this, since it means he no longer has to test the medicine on himself. Realizing it can restore water energy, he's certain it will help Madame Dinrior recover. Filled with determination, he takes the soup to her room. He asks her son how she's doing, and the son replies disappointedly that she hasn't improved at all. Seeing that her energy has been further Depleted, he really hopes this soup will do the trick. He coaxes her into drinking the tonic even though she complains that it's bitter. He explains that bitter taste often comes with good medicine, and then proceeds to take care of her for the next 10 days. Everyone is shocked to see him personally feeding the patient and looking after her all by himself, which earns him a great deal of respect from his subordinates. Meanwhile, he's fighting through his own exhaustion, desperate to hang on just a little longer to earn that bonus life since he's so close. And with that, his system congratulates him, informing him that he has finally cured his patient's epidemic typhus fever. Thanks to his incredible effort and the respect he earned from his subordinates, his medical treatment skill levels up now, increasing its effectiveness by 1.5 times. Along with his patient's recovery, he also gains a life expectancy of 146 days and 8 days of bonus life. Realizing he can earn rewards like this, our boy gets a mischievous idea, creating a benevolent persona for himself, one that would earn him praise and respect from everyone around him. And that in turn would net him even more bonus life. The scene cuts to a carriage rolling through the woods with our hero inside. He's thinking about hiring professional nurses since he's been managing on his own so far, but he knows he can't keep it up for much longer without their help. After a bit, Madame Denrior and her son step out of the carriage. The Madame thanks him for the ride and for curing her, admitting she's not sure how she could ever repay him. He just smiles, thinking about the bonus life he's gained, and politely replies that seeing her healthy again is more than enough reward. His noble words get her all choked up. Moved by his kindness, they exchange goodbyes and begin to leave. It seems our guy isn't quite finished yet, though, as he stops her son and invites him back into the carriage for a private chat. Madame Denrior's son is a little hesitant, questioning if they should even be talking like this, while his back is to the crown prince, but the prince just waves it off. The son waited for him to state his business, but Raquel remained silent for a while. Then all of a sudden our dude starts complaining about how sore his whole body is and how much sleep he's lost while taking care of the young man's mother. Hearing all this, Denrior offers to compensate him for treating his mother. Our sly hero, however, tells him he couldn't possibly accept anything from a patient, as it would ruin his reputation. But the son insists, saying he truly wants to do something in return. Upon hearing this, our hero is more than happy to agree, pointing out that since the son technically isn't his patient, he can accept help from him. He then asks for assistance with a certain matter, revealing that Denrier is an artist. A few days later in Fonda, Plaza, a landlord, suggests to a young man that he should go get a job with the crown prince, who is currently hiring. The young man, however, isn't having it and just taunts the landlord, pointing out that he's not behind on rent even though he's unemployed. The landlord immediately counters that he's actually 2 months late on rent. The young man panics at this and immediately rushes off to find the money. Meanwhile, a mysterious girl in a hood listens in on their conversation, contemplating something. The scene shifts to an art gallery where a large crowd has gathered around one painting in particular. Our Prince Raquel is there, along with Denrier. Raquel congratulates him on his debut as a professional artist. Denrier, however, doesn't seem particularly happy. When you see the paintings he's made, it's pretty obvious why the poor artist isn't thrilled to be showing them off. Several of the pictures are of the crown prince with the first, one showing him striking a dramatic pose next to a captain with the words, "I want you." Other paintings feature him in cool poses, including one with his companions. One extremely detailed painting portrays him as a crying girl, which makes Daman want to slash the canvas. Denrier seems a little unsure if his paintings will actually help the prince in his search for a nurse. The crown prince, however, reassures him, saying that his work will definitely leave an impression. He points out another one of Denrier's paintings in which Raquel is depicted, surrounded by a host of tough-looking nurses with a captain in the corner labeled, "Show me Ganho." The painting also features a written description, encouraging people to become nurses with the promise of a generous salary from the crown prince. Seeing this, tons of people are eager to sign up and become nurses. The scene shifts to a registration booth where Garden is signing people up for the nurse selection test. People are eager to apply, having heard that the salary is so good they could cover 2 years' rent with just 1 month's pay. Meanwhile, that same mysterious girl is in line at the booth, checking out the application requirements. But when she reads that applicants must be residents of the Empire, her posture stiffens with determination. Meanwhile, our protagonist is thrilled to see so many people applying for the nursing positions. When Damien asks him why he's so happy, he explains that he's excited because the more nurses he recruits, the more patients he can cure, which will in turn extend his own life expectancy. Damien, on the other hand, is simply impressed by our hero's kindness, especially considering the generous salary he's offering. 6 days later, an event called Show Me Genho kicks off, where the Crown Prince will test the applicants to see if they're fit to be nurses. The mysterious girl also makes an appearance, looking quite pleased that she arrived on time. The host announces they've gathered everyone to reveal the first task of the nurse selection test. However, he then reveals that this task will actually be announced the following week. A week later, the host finally announces the first task and urges everyone to hurry over to the interview area. For this, they're divided into 5 groups from the 50 applicants who must now race to the main building of the side palace. But here's the twist. Only the first 10 candidates from each group to reach the side palace will move on to the next task. The rest will be disqualified. This shocks everyone, and they immediately sprint toward their destination, hoping to get there first. As soon as 10 candidates from a group enter the designated area, a guard disqualifies the rest. Then they immediately start the next task, which tests their ability to spot an improperly stored ingredient among the many others presented to them. During this task, one of the candidates suddenly collapses. Everyone glances over and hesitates for a moment, wondering if they should help. But ultimately, not one of them moves from their spot to assist the fallen candidate. Our protagonist watches this all unfold with a very serious expression. Garden then announces the end of the test, informing everyone they will be notified of the results. A few days later, the candidates are all left, worrying about their test results, but not a single one had bothered to help the sick applicant. It turns out the whole thing was a test set up by our hero to gauge the candidate's compassion for others. As soon as the candidates are gone, he rushes over to the ill person, who is none other than Damien, now worried about whether his acting was convincing enough. Our boy tells him he overdid it a bit and needs to be more natural next time. He demonstrates by putting on his own hilariously dramatic performance of collapsing in front of Damien. He then asks how the candidates did, and Damien confirms that all of them failed. Our hero adds that character is far more important for a nurse than skills which can always be taught later. Next, they observe the following group, but they also fail. In fact, every single group fails, leaving our protagonist completely flabbergasted that not one person cared enough to help a fallen comrade. So he decides to take a walk to clear his head. Meanwhile, he's also thinking that there are no candidates left, and he urgently needs to find a nurse. When he reaches the gate, he finds his guard arguing with a young woman, telling her she's not allowed to participate because she isn't human. The girl retorts, emphasizing that she is in fact human. Witnessing this scene really frustrates him. Not only are they short on candidates, but now his guard is refusing to let one in. Hearing this, Damen deadpans that the girl is a werewolf. The guard points out that she doesn't have a tail, but Damen just responds that she might be hiding it under her loose clothes. Damen suspects Raquel might be uneasy with the idea of a werewolf for a nurse. However, our opportunistic hero, who is desperate to find a nurse, sees a werewolf as the perfect candidate due to her abilities. Meanwhile, the girl tries to defend herself as a citizen of the nation, but the guard insists she's just a beast. Their argument is interrupted by the Crown Prince, who scolds his guards and tells them to knock it off. The girl, as a citizen of the capital, has every right to apply for the job. He then orders the guard to apologize to her, leaving the girl completely baffled. He also apologizes to her on behalf of his guard, and she introduces herself as Agnes. He tells her she'll be tested right now, which startles her. Noticing her baffled expression, he explains that as a werewolf, she must have great stamina, but he wants to see it with his own eyes. He then pits her against his guard in a race. The rules are simple. They'll race to the fountain and back, and the first one to return wins. Agnes is all fired up to hear this. She turns to the guard, ready for a showdown. Both Agnes and the guard are determined to beat each other as they bolt towards the destination, with Agnes taking the lead. Within a few minutes, she taps the fountain's post and sprints back. As she zooms past the guard, she sizes up his slow speed and figures she's got this in the bag. The guard, who's already on edge, sprains his ankle and tumbles to the ground. She notices him fall and briefly wonders if he dislocated his shoulder, but she tries to keep going, determined to win. However, her conscience gets the better of her, and she turns back to pop his shoulder back into place, which prompts a shriek from him. While she's taking care of him, our hero congratulates her, telling her she's hired. He then hands her the necklace made by George. Afterwards, they sit down inside, and the Crown Prince shows her the employment contract. When she remarks that it looks complicated, he gently coaxes her to read it at her own pace. He's very keen on hiring her, not just for her physical abilities, but also for her personality, which makes her perfect for the job. Besides, he saw her fixing the guard's shoulder, and it looked like she wanted to make it as painful as possible, which might make for some unhappy patients down the line. Regardless, he still wants more people with her qualities. After reading the contract, she informs him with a serious expression that she wants to add a clause of her own. She explains that she is the leader of her tribe, which makes our greedy hero practically drool at the prospect of having 50 more people like her at his disposal. When she demands that they also take a nursing test, he happily agrees. Then she gets to the real heart of the matter, an issue her people have struggled with for years. He guesses, is it a rationing problem? But she quickly shakes her head no. She explains that the trouble is, believe it or not, their tails, which have a mind of their own. Our guy is a little confused, wondering how that could possibly be a bad thing. She explains sadly that their tails are total traitors broadcasting their emotions for everyone to see, which makes them easy targets for manipulation. And that's when it clicks for him. He realizes that must be why she's in such baggy clothes. He suggests, why not just tie your tail to your leg? She replies that her tail flat out refuses to cooperate, acting like it's a completely separate entity with its own stubborn personality. She describes it as an organ that just does whatever it wants, completely ignoring her.